History is not a story that is told. 'Tis a mystery that must be solved. At Echoes of Genius, we don't just tell the story, we lead the investigation. And tonight, our investigation begins with the greatest mystery of the ancient world. The death of a king who had conquered the world, surrounded by friends who had every reason to want him dead. Was it a tragic fever or the perfect crime? This is the investigation into who killed Alexander the Great. June 11th, 323 BC, in the opulent palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. The greatest conqueror the world had ever known was dying. At the age of just 32, Alexander the Great, master of the known world, was ravaged by a mysterious fever. And around his bed, his top generals gathered like vultures, their faces a mask of concern, hiding a cold, calculating ambition. His young Persian wife, Roxana, pregnant with his only legitimate heir, Akuta, could only watch, her grief mixed with a chilling fear of the powerful men who circled her husband's throne. This was the man who had led his small Macedonian army across the globe, shattering the mighty Persian Empire at legendary battles like Gaugamela. He had been hailed as a living god, the undisputed king of Asia, a man who had achieved more in a decade than most empires do in a century. But now, that immense power was fading with every shallow, agonizing breath. His second in command, General Perdiccas, leaned in close to ask the question on every man's mind. To whom he asked, "Do you leave your empire, Alexander?" Alexander's reply was not a name, but a prophecy of chaos. He whispered the fatal words, "Toi credest we," to the strongest. With that single phrase, he had not named a successor. He had declared a war of all against all. And every man in that room knew it. Shortly after, Alexander the Great, son of Zuzimon, conqueror of the world, was dead. The official cause was a fever. But history has always suspected a different cause: murder. The investigation begins with the man who had the most reason to hate him, Cassander. Cassander, the son of a powerful regent, had once been personally and brutally humiliated by Alexander, an insult he was known never to have forgiven. His powerful father, Antipater, had recently been summoned to Babylon by Alexander Call, many believed was a pretext for his execution. Did Cassander and his father conspire to act first, sending a colorless, untraceable poison to Babylon to save their own lives by taking the kings? Suspect number 2, Ptolemy, Alexander's clever, cautious, and calculating childhood friend. Ptolemy's motive was not hatred, but cold ambition. He had always coveted the rich, ancient, and easily defensible lands of Egypt for himself. He was a born survivor, a man who knew how to play the long game. Could he have orchestrated a subtle plot to carve out his own kingdom from the coming chaos? Suspect number 3, a killer from inside his own bedroom. His wife, Roxana. She was a foreign princess in a hostile court of Macedonian generals. With Alexander gone, she knew her life and the life of her unborn son were in mortal danger. Could she have acted first, in a desperate attempt to secure the throne for her child before Alexander's other wives and rivals could move against her? But perhaps the most powerful suspect of all was the army itself. Years of brutal, non-stop campaigning had taken their toll. In India, Alexander's loyal veteran soldiers had finally mutinied, refusing to march one step further east. He had pushed them beyond the limits of human endurance, dragging them across deserts and mountains in his insatiable quest for personal glory. The army's deep adoration for their king had curdled into a simmering resentment. Had that resentment finally boiled over into a conspiracy to end his endless wars, a dying king. A room full of powerful suspects, each with a clear motive. An empire without an heir. It was not just a tragedy, it was the perfect crime scene. With a room full of powerful suspects, the investigation now turns to the central question: what was the weapon that killed Alexander the Great? For over 2,000 years, history has been divided by two competing theories. Was it a sudden, fatal disease or a subtle, untraceable poison? The case for disease is strong. The city of Babylon in 323 BC was a notoriously unhealthy environment, a hotbed of infection. Its swamps bred legions of mosquitoes carrying deadly diseases like malaria and West Nile virus, both of which can cause raging fevers. And its water sources could have been contaminated with typhoid fever, another known killer in the ancient world that causes severe abdominal pain. Alzendu's recorded symptoms: high fever, chills, and crippling penar, consistent with many of these deadly infectious diseases. But ancient accounts also describe a strange, slow, 12-day decline of progression of symptoms. That didn't perfectly match any single illness known to his baffled physicians. Many modern historians believe disease is the most likely culprit, a mundane, natural end to a life that was anything but. They argue that Alexander's body, worn down by years of campaigning, excessive drinking, and multiple battle wounds, simply succumbed to an infection. But another, more sinister theory has always persisted: the theory of a sophisticated poison plot. Ancient toxicologists were masters of their craft, capable of creating powerful, slow-acting poisons from plants like white hellebore or strychnine. These poisons could be mixed with wine, leaving no taste and no immediate trace, but causing a slow, agonizing death that perfectly mimicked the symptoms of a fatal disease. And the perfect opportunity was there. On the night before he fell ill, Alexander attended a massive, chaotic banquet, drinking heavily with his friends and his hidden enemies. At the center of the poison theory is a key figure: Alexander's royal cupbearer, Iolaus. He was the son of Antipater and the brother of Cassander, the man who hated Alexander most. Could Cassander have sent an untraceable poison to his brother, ordering him to administer the fatal dose during the chaos of the feast? As the king's personal cupbearer, Iolaus had a position of ultimate trust and the perfect opportunity to strike. An opportunity that could be easily and fatally betrayed. Some ancient sources, though heavily debated, claim that Alexander cried out in agony immediately after drinking a specific cup of wine, as if struck by a spear. A reaction highly consistent with a powerful, corrosive poison. But the historical sources are contradictory. Other accounts make no mention of this cry of pain. The truth is lost in a fog of conflicting stories and propaganda. And so we are left with two possibilities: a deadly agent of nature or a deadly agent of man. The symptoms fit both theories. A raging fever can be caused by malaria, or by poison. Crippling abdominal pain can be typhoid or poison. And any definitive forensic proof was lost forever. Alexander's body was preserved for its journey home in a vat of honey, a process that would have destroyed any chemical trace of poison. The evidence for both sides is compelling, but neither is conclusive. The scales of history remain perfectly, frustratingly balanced. The truth of what or who was the weapon that killed the greatest conqueror in history remains buried in the lost texts and faded memories of the ancient world. To understand if Alexander was truly murdered, we must look at what happened next. We must investigate the ultimate motive: who benefited from his death. Alexander's final words to the strongest were not a succession plan. They were a death sentence for his own unified empire. Immediately after he died, his top generals, the men who had fought his brothers for a decade, began to turn on each other. The alliance that conquered the world died with its king. They named his infant son as the new king and his half-brother as a coroller. But this was a fiction. The heirs were powerless pawns in a game played by powerful men. They carved up the empire into governorships, each general taking a massive piece for himself, all while promising to rule in the name of the new king. But these promises were lies. Almost immediately, the wars of the successors began 20 years of brutal, relentless conflict where the world's greatest army turned upon itself. Ptolemy, the cautious strategist, made the first and most brilliant move. He hijacked Alexander's funeral procession and stole his body, taking the priceless symbol of legitimacy back to Egypt. There, he declared himself pharaoh, establishing an independent kingdom and a dynasty that would rule for 300 years. His ambition was completely fulfilled. Another general, Seleucus, seized the vast eastern territories from Babylon to India, creating his own massive, powerful empire. And back in Macedonia, the man who hated Alexander most, Cassander, ruthlessly consolidated his own power, setting his sights on the late king's family. He orchestrated the execution of Alexander's formidable mother, Olympias, eliminating a powerful political rival. And what of Alexander's wife and his only son, the boy king Alexander IV? They were placed under house arrest, their royal status now a prison sentence. A few years later, on Cassander's orders, both Roxana and the 13-year-old king were secretly murdered. The direct bloodline of Alexander the Great was wiped from the earth. For 2 decades, the world bled. The generals fought endless, savage wars, their personal ambition costing the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. When the dust finally settled, Alexander's dream of a single, unified world was shattered forever, replaced by 3 great rival Hellenistic kingdoms. The primary suspects in Alexander's death had not just survived the chaos, they had triumphed beyond their wildest dreams. They were all now powerful, wealthy kings. They had played the great Game of Thrones, and by removing the one piece that stood above them all, they had each won a kingdom. They inherited not only his power, but his unimaginable wealth, the captured treasures of the entire Persian Empire. Ptolemy, the ambitious friend, secured the wealthiest prize of all, Egypt. And Cassander, the hated rival, not only gained a kingdom, but had his ultimate revenge, destroying Alexander's entire family. And so the motive for murder becomes terrifyingly clear. It was the greatest prize in human history, the world's largest empire, ripe for the taking. Was a single, untraceable vial of poison the key that unlocked all of this power, all of this wealth for these ambitious men? Many modern historians now believe that the chaotic and bloody aftermath is itself the most powerful circumstantial evidence for a sophisticated murder plot. The empire was too vast, the prize too great for one man to hold. His death was the only thing that could allow his followers to claim their own piece of his glory. The investigation has shown us the suspects, the means, and now the overwhelming motive. Only one question remains. What is the final verdict? We have followed the evidence. We have investigated the suspects, the means, and the powerful motive. It is now time to reach a verdict. The life of the world's greatest conqueror ends not on a battlefield, but in a quiet room, surrounded by a web of conspiracy, ambition, and profound mystery. With his body lost to time, modern forensics can offer us no definitive proof. We are left only with the conflicting and often biased accounts of history. The case for natural causes is simple and plausible. Alexander's body, worn down by years of brutal campaigning, countless battle wounds, and heavy drinking, could have simply succumbed to a deadly fever in the unhealthy climate of Babylon. A mundane, anticlimactic end to an extraordinary life. But the case for murder, while circumstantial, is overwhelmingly compelling. The suspects had the means, the opportunity, and with the death of the king, they stood to gain the ultimate motive, the world's largest empire and royal crowns for themselves. To this day, historians and experts remain deeply divided. The evidence is too thin, the possibilities too numerous. The primary sources are too few, too contradictory, and too fragmented to deliver a final certain truth. The ultimate proof is lost forever. We know who benefited most. The men whose hatred and ambition were boundless. The men who went on to rule the world in his place. And we know that a sophisticated, slow-acting poison was the perfect weapon in an age of ruthless political assassination. And so we are left where we began, in a dark room in Babylon, with a dying king surrounded by his most trusted generals. A man who conquered the world, but could not conquer the ambition of the very men who had helped him do it. The truth of who or what killed Alexander the Great died with him in that room 2,000 years ago. And so, the final verdict is not for us to decide. It is for you. Was it a tragic act of nature or the perfect crime?